In the course of the Convocation, Building Communities of Salt Night with the theme, we've had 3 keynotes. This is our 4th and final keynote, even though, of course, after each keynote there were workshops, and after this there will be as well, and then tomorrow morning a panel. But for this 4th workshop, we have, following Jack and Susan, we have Bishop Jaime Soto. Bishop Soto was ordained a priest for the Diocese of Orange in California in 1982, and then ordained a bishop as an auxiliary bishop in the Diocese of Orange, and then became the ordinary in the Diocese of Sacramento 6 years ago, 2009.
2008, actually.
2008. And he heads a number or at least serves on and has had a number of USCCB committees. One of the things that I just did not mention, but which is a key aspect, I think, in appreciating Bishop Soto's education and experience, is that he went to school at Columbia University School of Social Work in Manhattan, and received a Master of Social Work in 1986. And then you can speak a little about your experience as an intern during those years. But so he brings that lens through which both his life and his priestly ministry have been even more sharply focused. And so in terms of the topic for this 4th keynote address, creating community, organizing for justice, or crafting communities of hope, it fits, I would think, amazingly well with your life as priest and as one trained in social worker now as bishop. Just a few of the committees that would represent, even though there are more committees he's been on, but that would represent this dimension of the Church's life. The Campaign for Human Development, with which we are all familiar. Clinic, which many of the priests here who have been familiar with the immigration process of having had to go through it themselves or helping others with, so clinic. And then President of Catholic Charities in California, is that right?
Well, actually the California Catholic Conference.
Catholic Conference of California. And then the National Council for Hispanic Ministry. So he brings this wide range, and yet it has a very clear focus to it, certainly in terms of our theme and the theme of this keynote. So Bishop Jaime, it is great to have you.
Thank you. I think I'm all wired up.
Oh, you're all wired, okay.
Thank you, Monsignor. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's wonderful to not only see this really great gathering here in the Diocese of Boise, but also it was nice to get here a little earlier for lunch, and then also understand a little bit of the dynamics to the earlier part of the afternoon, and which suits me. I kind of like a little bit of informality and give and take. So what I hope to present with you today, I'd like to, I won't say rush through it, but I will kind of, I'd like to see what I can do to move through some of my prepared thoughts and comments quickly, and so that I can, we can leave sufficient time for some exchange and dialogue and questions, and I enjoy that more, and I think hopefully you will too, and I find that a little bit more engaging. So if that works for everybody, see what I can do to, in the next 25, 30 minutes, go through my presentation. What I'd like to do is, well, first of all, I just want to say it is a pleasure to be here, and I actually have family that live in Jerome, Idaho, and I always come out here every Thanksgiving to see them in Jerome, and I always fly out of Boise to go back home to Sacramento. And but my brother, who lives up here with his wife and children, and myself and our family, we all come from Southern California, and so now I live up in Northern California. For those who understand California politics, know that that's really almost two very different states. But I also want to say that there is an affectionate connection with the Diocese of Boise because of Bishop Mike Driscoll. Bishop Mike Driscoll was the Vicar General when I was a newly ordained priest, a young guy, and one day I was asked to come into his office, and I said, I must have done something wrong. I'm not sure of which of these things I'm being brought into the office, but I went in there and sat down with Mike Driscoll, who was Monsignor Mike Driscoll at the time, and he says, Bishop Johnson wants you to go away and study social work. Now, as you know, Mike Driscoll is a social worker, and actually Bill Johnson, the first Bishop of Orange, is also a social worker, and so I mean, Mike Driscoll was really very excited. But I remember being so scared going in to see the Vicar General, and then to be invited to go away and study social work. I'd only been a priest for a couple of years, but they wanted me, Monsignor Mike and Bishop Johnson wanted me to study at a Catholic school of social work, and I had proposed, I gave it a little thought and came back, and I wanted to go to Columbia School of Social Work in New York. And I remember, Monsignor Mike, Bishop Mike saying, why would you want to do that, honey? And I said, well, I've been in Catholic schools all my life. He said, that's a great idea. And so I said, let me go. And it really was a great experience to be able to go to Columbia and also to work in the city of New York for a couple of days. I want to start off with a story here, and let's see if I can do this correctly. There we go. And I'm not going to read the whole article for you here, but this is, I like reading the newspaper, and I go through the newspaper every morning, the local newspaper in our area is the Sacramento Bee, and so I was going through the Sacramento Bee and then all of a sudden saw Mike Carroll in an article, and it just, for whatever reason, that name kind of leapt out of the story. And I said, oh no, Mike Carroll being one of our priests. I said, oh no. But this wound up being a really marvelous story. This was back in December. Mike Carroll was there meeting with the Placer County officials and advocating for the homeless in his area, and that he wanted them to turn over some abandoned Army barracks and to make it into a homeless shelter. Now, actually, if you would read this whole story, it actually is kind of pretty negative in terms of saying, the supervisors were not on board, it's about this terrible idea, where's the money going to come from, it won't work, we need to get rid of these people, the usual stuff on homelessness. But Father Mike Carroll, who is Irish priest, pretty determined guy. And just this past Monday, I went up to Placer, to Auburn, and for the dedication of the homeless shelter there in these barracks. And it was an incredible event, a very Mike Carroll event, because everybody was there, including the homeless. They were part of the crowd, and they were among the thank yous was a thank you to the homeless, and and Father Mike Carroll said with much sincerity, and I know Mike, I've seen him in action with the homeless in that area. He knows them all by name. And he said, you've taught me, he'd say, Joe, you've taught me so much. And Mary Lou, I remember that this happened to you, and I learned this and this and this. And it was a compelling story of not only of charity, but also of bringing a community together, and not just together to serve the homeless, but actually making the homeless part of the community. And now I will say they have 90 days. They've got to make this program work in 90 days. And so the Board of Supervisors have made it clear that they're going to evaluate this program in 90 days and see if they can keep it. So I'm pretty sure they're going to do it because not only did Mike Carroll have this vision, but he also knew how to bring people together around it. And he knew how to build that kind of coalition and relationships with people, even with the homeless, that will make, I believe, will make this program a tremendous success. So I am very hopeful that when the 90 days are done, that this program will continue. But I wanted to start with this very recent, but I also thought very compelling story about what the work of charity and what the work of justice is about, and how a parish and a community can indeed work together to bring about the kingdom of God. Get back here to, okay. I wanted to start off with, obviously there's in the scriptures, whether it's the prophets that were quoted to us earlier, or stories of Jesus and the Sermon on the Mount, or so many of the other powerful examples, Matthew 25, whatever you do to the least of my brothers, you do to me. There's a lot of compelling stories, but I wanted to start with this particular story, which perhaps seems rather matter of fact, but I think is important to what you are discussing over the course of your days, and what I would like to try to present to you. This comes from the Acts of the Apostles. If you remember earlier on in Acts, it starts off with really quite a very positive and exciting story that there's Pentecost, the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. They're building this large community. People are coming together from all different languages and cultures, and they have a common life together. They have the la cononia, la convivencia, common shared life, and they share everything in common, and there's this sense of being one body, one community. Well, this is chapter 6 of Acts, and things aren't going very well. Have a tough time. There's a little fallout between the Jews and the Greeks, and so the 12 call together the community of disciples and say, that listen, this is getting a little bit out of hand. We can't do that and do the preaching and the evangelizing that we need to do. So, select from among you 7 reputable men filled with the Spirit and wisdom, whom we shall appoint to this task. What is that task? The diaconia, the service, charity. Whereas we shall devote ourselves to prayer and to the ministry of the word. I cite this, and this next quote here that comes out is, this is from DCE's Deus Caritas Est. This is Pope Benedict's encyclical on charity. And he quotes this passage in Acts to talk about how the mission of the church's mission of charity, the how and why it began. And what's at the heart of this is that the church's charitable mission is always at the service of the church's communion. So diaconia is always at the service of koinonia. Caritas is always at the service of comunión, of bringing people together. And so, oftentimes, I think in some of the examples that were provided earlier, that sometimes we can have a sense of charity becomes a way of keeping people apart. Or, I'm up here, you're down there. There's all those kinds of, in many ways, what we would see as a distortion of what real charity is about. And I wanted to begin with this to have us centered on the fact that the charitable mission of the church and the justice mission of the church really has one purpose in mind, that they may be one, as you and I are one. That all can be one people, share that communion. Just last week we celebrated the Trinity, and that mystery of the Blessed Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, is a mystery that we are a part of, and that the mystery of the church is understood as our sharing in that oneness, that communion of life that is the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, in which all of us are baptized into. Okay. What I want to, this is, we have here in the United States in America, not only as Catholics, we can draw a lot of inspiration from our own faith tradition. But I also think that our legacy as a Catholic Church in the United States also is not only very Catholic, but it is also at the heart of what the best sense of being an American is, of what we can do as a nation. And I pulled out these couple of quotes here from Alexis de Tocqueville's book on democracy in America. And this is a story, this is an account of a Frenchman, who happens to be Catholic, French Catholic, and he comes to the United States, and you may be familiar with his work, a rather significant, large tome, and he just marvels at American life, or how American democracy works. Now, he's dealing with the experience also of the French Revolution, which is not going so well, and yet the American Revolution seemed to work. And American life and American experience of democracy was different. And he wanted to get at the why. And one of those dimensions of the why is this whole sense of association. And how, that American life seems to thrive on people coming together, on people working together, cooperating, and having that sense of common bond, common life, and pursuing the common good. And that is, that also speaks to us as Catholics in the United States as to why we do the work we do and what we contribute, particularly with that impulse, that desire for communion, and that understanding our charity as at the service of creating community, creating neighborhoods, creating a better society. That's one of the virtues that we bring to American life. Now, one of the other things I wanted to share with you on this is oftentimes, and I'm from the state of California, and so some people will say that I'm from the left side of the state, at least the left side of the country. But California politics is crazy. I mean, I don't know much about Idaho state politics, but California politics is pretty rough. Being in Sacramento is it's being very close to the sausage factory, but that there is, oftentimes in our own work or involvement in the community or in society, we oftentimes get into we are perceived by many, and perhaps even that we ourselves can see ourselves that way as the Church of No. That the Catholics are defined by what we are against, and whether that's being against abortion, or being against the death penalty, or being against euthanasia, or being against so-called same-sex marriages, or that we allow ourselves to be portrayed as the Church of No, the community of No. And I think that one of the important ideas for us is to remember that we are a church of yes, and for us to operate out of what it is, our own hopes and visions about the coming of the kingdom of God, and to really let that shape our language as well as our work in what we do. And I took this. This comes from Pope Saint John Paul, or Saint Pope John Paul. I'm sure there's a protocol on that. But Saint John Paul's Evangelium Vitae, and this comes from the 81st section. Oftentimes, again, people will mention or cite this document in terms of what the Pope says about abortion, or about the death penalty, or about euthanasia. But in this document, it's in the 81st section of this document, is the Holy Father outlines what he would hold up as characteristics of a culture of life. And I'd like to just spend a little bit of time with you on this, because I think that understanding these characteristics and how we live them out, and how we build that culture of life, then can help us to also see how we, as a church, really present ourselves as a community that says yes. Yes to life, yes to the good of the human person, and yes to the good of human society. And how we can become protagonists of that kind of culture. And not just, again, as people can oftentimes perceive us as the Church of No. A proclamation of living God who's close to us, who calls us to a profound communion with himself and awakens in us a certain hope of eternal life. This is something that Pope Francis has reiterated again in much of the stuff that he has written about, in that sense of creating a culture of encounter. An encounter with God, an encounter with our neighbor, an encounter with the poor, even an encounter with our adversary, with our enemy. That somehow we have to live with this hope of having an encounter with the living God. Not just at the end of time, but even in our own existence, in our own life. Very much a lot of Christian hospitality. The virtue of Christian hospitality for us, whether that be the Benedictines, or whether that just be what we try to do in parish life, is rooted in this sense of preparing ourselves to meet the Lord. I had that experience of encounter at this homeless shelter in Auburn, California, seeing the dynamic between Father Mike Carroll and the community there, and the idea that they were, in a real sense, receiving Christ into the center. This value, or this characteristic of really that this is who we proclaim, the living God, and that He wants to be close to us and have a profound communion with Himself and us. That is also at the heart of our own appreciation of what creation brings, and why, for us, there is a reverence of creation. It's not only just of taking care of creation or being good stewards of creation, but for us, there is a reverence of creation, knowing that that God reveals Himself to us through creation. So that there isn't just a utilitarian understanding or appreciation about God's creation, but that, in fact, we do see it as it's a proclamation of God, the living God, who is close to us. An affirmation of the inseparable connection between the person, his life, and his bodyliness. In reading that, you have to understand that John Paul was a phenomenologist, which is kind of a rather dense form of philosophical thinking, and that kind of thinking comes out of this. But what this whole principle, or this whole characteristic that John Paul talks about, speaks to the integrity of the human person, the wholeness of the human person, which is part of what underlines our own theology, our own thinking about what human sexuality is about, our understanding of how we care for, our understanding of the health of the human body, the human person, mentally, spiritually, physically, that we choose. We don't just break that up into components, but that as Catholics, we do believe in that God saves us, not just our soul, but that He saves us body and soul. And in the Apostles' Creed, we said we believe in the resurrection of the body. And so that there is for us this sense of the integrity of the human person, which is at the heart of what the great appreciation and reverence that we have for human sexuality. And also, again, that reverence and respect for creation. Because having a human body, we are part of creation. And unless we take care of the creation in which we live, it will be very difficult for us to sustain ourselves. Because we are, by the nature of our human bodies, we are part of the creation that we live in. The presentation of human life as a life of relationship, the gift of God, the fruit and sign of His love. This goes into the very heart of why politics is not just a necessary evil for us. Politics is part of the nature, an extension of the very social nature of the human person. And the human person is created out of a relationship, the relationship of a man and a woman. And so, and we live out, we realize our human dignity in the context of relationships, whether that be with family and friends, whether that be in the workplace, whether that be in our neighborhood or in our schools, that all those social relationships speak to the dignity of the human person. And because of that, we have a strong investment in wanting to to sanctify and to make even more human the relationships we have. At the heart of that is one of the two principles that I think are really important for Catholics. One of them is the principle of solidarity. Somehow, the word, the definition of human solidarity, as developed by John Paul, Benedict, and now Francis, is that sense that we are very connected. That what I do as an individual matters. Matters not just for my family or my immediate circle of the community that I'm a part of, but matters in the world. That the example of the letter, what is the impact of one letter? That goes to the heart and meaning of what solidarity, and why the virtue of solidarity is so important to us. The other principle that speaks to human relationships, and one that is particularly Catholic and sometimes oftentimes misunderstood, is the word subsidiarity, or the principle of subsidiarity. And I remember Governor Brown in California used the word subsidiarity in a presentation, and the California press just panicked because nobody knew what the word meant. So they thought it was a part of his Jesuit background. But I remember there was a day or two afterwards, and I was in a Catholic gathering, and again, there had been this big, in Sacramento there was this thing, the governor used the word subsidiarity. And the Catholics were saying, gosh, that's one of our words. That's our word. It's being used in the Capitol. A simple, at least my simple definition of subsidiarity is, how can we put resources and power, decision-making power, at a level where it can do the most good? And that really goes to a lot of the work of justice, a lot of the work of charity. How do we put resources and decision-making at the level where it can do the most good? Okay, proclamation that Jesus has a unique relationship with every person, which enables us to see in every human face the face of Christ. Pope Benedict is, I think, used an expression, and then Pope Francis picked it up in some of his recent remarks regarding the Year of Mercy that is being prepared for next year. And that in the person of Jesus, mercy has a face. In the person of Jesus, mercy has a face. And that for us, that Jesus is the sacrament of God, that we see in the person, and the man Jesus, the God who loves us, the God who is merciful, the God who is compassionate. But we also see in him that he is the firstborn of the new creation. He is not only the image of the invisible God, but he is the firstborn of creation. That he and that we are part of that creation. We are his brothers and sisters in that new creation of a new humanity. And so for us, our relationship with Jesus and how Jesus is part of every relationship that we have is at the heart of what we do. And one of the groups that I really admire in my diocese, and I'm sure that the same can be said here in Boise, is the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. And one of the aspects that I like about the work of St. Vincent de Paul is that when they do their visits, when they do their home visits, they do it with almost a certain religious, as almost a religious ritual, of they're going to meet the Lord. They're going to meet the Lord Jesus. And that is very much at the heart of what we bring to creating a culture of life and of hope. Lastly is a call for a sincere gift of self. It's the fullest way to realize our personal freedom. This is perhaps something even in America that we have lost a certain sense of sacrifice, and whether as a society, and then maybe even sometimes as a church, that we've lost a connection with the value of sacrifice. First of all, of the sacrificial nature of Jesus' gift to us on the cross and how we share in that. But that, not only for the person of Jesus, but that even for ourselves, that the truest expression of freedom and the true expressions of love comes out of that sincere gift of oneself. And that really is at the heart of creating a culture of life, is that willingness to make a sacrifice. I was, one of the things that the relationship between charity and justice is one that is often debated and discussed. I know that both in the case of Benedict and Francis, Pope Francis, that they would turn it around from what is oftentimes the more common way of viewing that. There oftentimes can be the idea that somehow that justice is more than charity. And that somehow that justice makes a greater demand than charity. But that both Benedict and then also Francis has really outlined that actually charity, true Christian charity, presumes justice. And that in one remark that Pope Benedict makes in his document on charity, he makes the observation that even in the perfectly just world, that the Christian would still be called to charity. But it's a sense of charity that is actually sacrificial. But the Christian is still called to give of oneself for the sake of others. Now these characteristics of the culture of life are ways that are dimensions that we live out in our faith. They're very much part of our rituals or our teaching, very much at the heart of what the social magisterium of the church is about. But also they should be the characteristics that are part of how we do our charitable work, how we engage in the political process, how we do the works of justice. I'd like to go to this small these principles of social development, and this comes from Pope Francis's document Evangelii Gaudium. Oh, I was going to put the citation, but if you Google any of these expressions, it'll come right up. But these are, in one part of Pope Francis's document, Evangelii Gaudium, he outlines what he calls the principles of social development. The characteristics of the culture of life, I think, in a certain sense, are a good framework for understanding how we, the why and the what of what we communicate to ourselves as a Catholic community, and what we need to communicate to the world, to the political process. I would like to propose these principles of social development that Pope Francis has as the how we do that. And I'll say that these are good things for how one runs a parish, as well as how one does the work of building a better community, a better world. And these are principles that, quite frankly, that Pope Francis has. They came out in his apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium, but that he has reflected on these and talked about these through the course of his time as the Archbishop of Buenos Aires. Now, I don't know how much you understand about the politics of Argentina, but that if he can come up with these kinds of principles for that kind of political system, then I think this might work. The first one is time is greater than space. Time is greater than space. Earlier on, somebody was talking about how long the political process can take, and that can be very frustrating, and that can be very disillusioning. But Pope Francis talks about the importance of taking that time, of bringing people along, of starting out with what you can do. There may be really very important issues that we've got to we've got to change this, or there may be urgent issues that we think should consume all of our time and energy. But the importance of taking time and doing what you can do, building relationships, persuading day by day, that the importance of doing that in order to have effective change, in order to bring about true personal conversion as well as true social conversion. The time is greater than space. Rather than trying to impose one's idea or one's authority into a situation. Unity prevails over conflict. In this section, the Holy Father talks about how conflict is an inevitable part of human interaction. And the temptation is to either avoid it. I've had priests come in and say, well, Bishop, I don't deal well with conflict. Well, and you want to be a pastor. The temptation is to avoid it. Often the other temptation is to get trapped in it. That you get into this win or lose situation. And the Holy Father talks about a third way is to face conflict and to go deeper, to try to listen to the other, to have the respect and the reverence of the dignity of the other person, and to remember that we are all called to community. Reality are more important than ideas. Now, I think at the heart of this is that as a Catholic community, we believe in the Incarnation. We believe that the Word became flesh, and that we find that Word in the flesh, the messiness of our own human life, our own parishes, of our own neighborhoods, And there was the point that was made earlier about, all different kinds of studies, and you have to, what about this and what about that? And the importance we can get caught up in very partisan or ideological ideas. And the value, the asceticism, we have a personal asceticism, hopefully as an institutional asceticism that tries to stay focused in reality, tries to stay rooted in the reality of people's lives, the reality of the poor, the reality of those who are incarcerated, of those struggling with mental illness, the realities of our families, what it means to raise children, to keep a job. Those are when we can speak from realities, when we can speak from the stories and the narratives of our neighbors, then we're more strongly rooted. The whole is greater than the part. And this is, one, the integrity of our message, the integrity of the gospel. There are, there's always going to, folks are always going to like part of what we teach and not want, I'll agree with you on this issue, but this issue I won't. And that's true across the board. Oftentimes, I think people, a lot of folks like what we do as a church. They don't like why we do it. They don't like the reasons. So for us, there's an integrity. The whole is greater than the part. And we ourselves have to struggle to keep the integrity of our message together, the gospel message together. And the integrity of our mission, to announce the gospel to all people. That virtue of solidarity is a firm and persevering personal commitment to the common good. I want to just end with a brief reflection on these are some further quotes from de Tocqueville, which I always find rather interesting. People will say, and there's a certain truth to this, that politics is always the world of the possible. What can we get done? But yet, even in the midst of that, for us, as a Catholic community in American society, particularly today when we have many challenges, is that it's our faith and our Christian hope that does give us the freedom to even push beyond the possible. We do have to be practical. We have to, and continue to, as the Holy Father pointed out, that be willing to take the time to stick with it and keep working and try to bring about the kingdom of God here on earth as it is in heaven. But we do that with a belief that the kingdom will come and that Jesus is waiting for us, and that in many ways that we have already won. And we can't lose sight of that, or let others take that away from us, but always to have that sense of hope. And so I'm going to stop there and open it up for comments, questions.
Could you comment on how you see this convocation and the presentation you've just made fitting into the Year of Mercy?
Well, I think I'll talk about what we're doing in California. And one of the things that as we anticipate the Year of Mercy that the Holy Father is proposing, that we have a tradition of the temporal works of mercy and the spiritual works of mercy. And that we think that this is an opportunity to actually highlight that aspect of the Church's tradition of the temporal works, of the works of charity, the works of justice, of the spiritual works of mercy, of conversion and persuading and praying for others. That I think there's an opportunity to demonstrate the value of those works and that aspect of our tradition that oftentimes we've kind of forgotten. So I think that I would propose, if you are looking at what to do for the Year of Mercy, that would be one approach for you. Yes.
What's the conversation like between the Catholic conference in California and the state legislature in terms of some of these very hot-button issues? How is there a respectful conversation that goes on? And also a way of making a convincing case for the Catholic perspectives on issues.
Well, let me speak to that from a couple of different angles, because I'll say that in California, it is in many ways a very adversarial environment, and there are those who again, who perhaps like what we do, but don't like why we do it, and are very determined to undermine the why. And in some sense, our obligation as bishops and then also as a Catholic community is not to engage that polemic, which again is very adversarial, but to, in a certain sense, what are we for? What are we willing to be protagonists of something better? And so, on a couple of issues that, for example, one of the things that we've done over the course of the last few years is that we've built up what we call the Catholic Legislative Network. I don't know how some of you have heard of that, but this has been a very significant tool where the California Catholic Conference has people sign up for it. They sign up with an email, and they get weekly updates as to where we are with different legislation. One of the big legislation issues that we're pushing right now has to do with the physician-assisted suicide. You may know that that's actually it's going to be voted on today or tomorrow. But I want to sound cautiously hopeful that we actually do stand a chance that we may be able to hold that bill back in the Senate. But some of that is because of the good work that we've done in building up this network across the whole state, so that it's not just the bishops speaking out, but we actually do have a lot of the Catholic faithful who do write in, who respond very actively on these issues. And then we do one of the other areas where we were very effective with that is in California we have the how should I say, it's the difficult, the initiative process, the referendums, and California is governed by referendums, and so oftentimes the legislature isn't able to get a lot done, and so they oftentimes get paralyzed on some issues. One of that issues is in criminal justice, or in trying to bring about any kind of prison reform. It's very difficult for the legislature to do that because they're oftentimes paralyzed. But we've been able to mobilize a rather kind of effective coalition, and we were able to get a proposition to do some sentencing reform in the last general election, and I think that's been positive. And there are other issues where we are working with the legislature on issues that we can find some common ground on. But I will say that it's a challenge and it's difficult, and but that it kind of goes back to if I can that unity prevails over conflict. The conflict or the adversarial nature of the work that we are involved in isn't a reason to back away or to become completely pessimistic. But we do have to stay engaged with it and to try to be as hopeful as we can.
So you're talking about in California, you've got people that work on these referendums and things. What could we do here in Idaho to maybe make some type of a process, or as a Catholic church, work together to help maximize our presence in the legislature? And really kind of, what do you see as a way that would work? Because we just heard from Christine Tiddens, and creo que de Ana también, sobre how can we really put our faith in what we believe and put it into the real action to be a systemic change, as opposed to just treating the Band-Aid wounds. But what can we do in a real specific way?
Well, I think one of there was one suggestion that came up earlier, which I thought was start off in your parishes with what are the issues that you can handle, that are doable, whether it's at let's say your city council level or your school board level, and the reason for doing that is not only because you want to give, I think you want to give folks an experience that they can succeed at something, but also to begin to give folks the experience that they can in fact do it, that they can make a difference, and that it is possible to make change. If you start off with, if you start off with, we're gonna work for world peace, you're not going to get there. But if you start off with, well, how could we, how do we have a safer park, or we need a traffic light at this intersection, and you begin to build relationships and build and also give people practice on something that's really very doable, achievable, that you will find with time that you can do bigger projects. Now, you may say, well, gosh, we don't have time. We've got these, big issues, and if you don't start, some of the stuff that we've been able to do at the state level, we've been at it for a while in terms of developing networks and relationships. We've had, I'll say that some of the work that we've done on restorative justice started off with parish volunteers that were, just meeting with their local police officers, police force, police chief to, try to, how can we have better neighborhoods? But eventually, then they became, they became part of a larger network that began to then address some of the larger issues of criminal justice. So some of that is to, I think, to start small, to start with the doable, and then but then to also be strategic as to, how are we building better capacity over time. One of the principles that we work a lot with in terms of community organizing is that we do try to plan for success. What can we succeed in? I'll say that, that there are, in our Catholic community, there are those on different issues that, that success is not important. We have to be right on the issue. Okay, yeah, I get that. But in order to bring, the whole community along, and to show the capacity to be able to make a difference, I think it's important for folks to walk before they can run, for folks to write a letter, or make that phone call before they maybe do that visit, before they go to a big rally, so I think you do have to think in steps and break it down. I don't know if that helps.
That was the Holy Spirit talking, because we do need to make a safer park.
Thank you, Bishop Soto. Thank you so much.
Maybe one of the things you've noticed through all these presentations is that the Catholic Church doesn't work towards justice and mercy alone. There's lots of people of goodwill, lots of organizations that are headed down the same path. And I'd like to introduce our next presenters for this next workshop. And it's Becky Illy and Julia Page, who are board members of an organization called the Idaho Organization of Resource Councils, IORC, which they will be speaking more about exactly what it does. But one of the things, ways to describe it is, it utilizes membership engagement to bring together the different small organizations to do a multi-issue effort focusing on local, state, and regional campaigns. They work on issues that are identified by their membership and provide staff support to the local chapters. As an organization, their members are their leaders and spokespeople, as in these two board members will be speaking. Current campaigns that this organization is focusing on at the moment include responsible oil and gas development, livestock and local foods, river restoration, recycling, and local farmers market support. Becky is a lifelong Idahoan. She's the one right there that's getting the microphone. And lives in Boise, raised on a family farm and ranch in rural Canyon County. She graduated from Boise State, yay, and with a degree in sociology, started her own small business as an independent sales rep in 2007 and travels throughout Idaho and Montana. Becky began her involvement with the Idaho Organization of Resource Councils in 2012 as a member of a steering committee and to begin the process of forming a statewide organization. Been a board member since 2014. Julia Page, who you will be hearing from as well, there she is, just moved to Boise 2 years from Gardner, Montana. She ran a rafting business in Gardner for many years, and she was also active in conservation both locally and on the state level. Sold her business before moving, and now enjoys the challenge of working on conservation in a new state with a new nonprofit organization, with new issues, and with different players, activists, politicians, administrators, and citizens. Thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you for, on behalf of IORC, I'd like to thank you for Bishop Christensen and for the diocese for inviting us to come today and speak to you a little bit about our organization and the work that we're currently doing here in Idaho. And you might be wondering what the connection is with this organization and coming to Convocation. And so we became. Can you hear me okay? No.
Very closer to you.
Closer to you. Okay. Now can you hear me? Okay.
A little better.
Okay. So a couple of years ago, we came on, I guess you would say, the radar of the diocese when we were first in our formation as an organization and inquiring about CHD funding. And so over the course of the last couple of years, we just kept in touch with the diocese and let them know where we were at, and they were very supportive about forming this organization. So we're currently being considered for CHD funding. So that just kind of gives you that connection with us. So to give you, as Father said, my personal background is that I was raised on a family farm and ranch in rural Canyon County. And so I've always felt very, really valued that lifestyle and really appreciated it. And so when I was in college, I became an intern with an organization that was very similar to IORC. And then when I got out of college, I ended up working for them in the early to mid-90s as a community organizer. And just really became very sold on the whole idea of that concept and empowering people at a local level to give them the tools and the knowledge to affect change in their own communities. And as Bishop Soto also talked about, really I think that the root of that is building relationships. Because when you're out in the community and you're talking one-on-one to people, that's where everything begins. And so back in 2011 or 2012, when I was approached about being on the steering committee for this, to start this new organization in Idaho, it didn't take me very long to say yes, because I was very passionate about the issues and what the organization could do. This is our mission statement, which, as it says, it's an organization working to protect Idaho's unique way of life by empowering citizens to improve the economic well-being of their communities by preserving family farms and ranches, supporting local sustainable agriculture, developing small businesses and clean energy, and being responsible stewards of Idaho's water, land, air, and natural resources. So a little bit of history in how this all came about is that we started in 2012 as a project. It's called the Idaho Organizing Project, and it started with a group out of Billings, Montana called the Western Organization of Resource Councils, and that's a 7-member state organization that works on regional issue campaigns and leadership development throughout the western states. And so they've done an assessment and been looking at Idaho again, and really saw a need for an organization like ours. And so that's where things began. And the steering committee for this organization started meeting in the summer of 2012, and that's when I became involved in. So we've really spent we probably spent a good year and a half on the nuts and bolts of the organization. So if any of you are familiar with starting a new church, but building a new organization, everything from we had to come up with a name to a mission statement. We incorporated, we hired staff, we drafted bylaws and chapter criteria, began talking and making decisions on issues that we wanted to work on. And then this past November, we held our first annual meeting in November of 2014 and elected our first board of directors. And then in February of this year, so just a couple months ago, we received our nonprofit 5013 tax status. So that kind of made us really official when that happened. And I think there are many great organizations in this state, nonprofit groups, conservation, environmental groups, advocacy groups, but really not an organization that is doing what we're doing on a local level on the issues that we're organizing around. Because we're really on the ground, we're out in the field, talking to people one-on-one. And I think that makes a huge difference, and people feeling like they really have a voice in the process. And I also think personally sometimes that especially our rural communities are targeted sometimes as, maybe people there aren't as well educated, maybe they don't know what's going on, so we can kind of sneak in through the back door and do some of these things, and people aren't going to notice. And another reason that I think for having this organization. And that's, so one of the things about IORC that I think makes us unique is that we're member-driven and member-led. So the members of the organization are the ones making the decisions on the issues that we're going to be working on. And this is just an example of, you can see all the paper taped up on the wall and all the ideas and the folks that came together that day. And that's how this organization is structured. And also that the leadership is elected from the membership. And we have about 150 members currently. And as most of you know, I think it's the same scenario in a church, in a parish, that your membership is key in keeping that healthy and keeping that growing, keeping them engaged. And so that's always a challenge for us to keep that going. And one of the ways is by the issues that we work on, that we're not just single issue focused, that there are a variety of issues that we work on, and that comes from our members and oftentimes from our chapters. And that's a little bit hard to see. This is a brand new chapter that was formed in the fall of last year, and this is in Pocatello. It's called the Coordinate Resource Council. And we have another chapter, which is the Weezer River Resource Council, which is over in Washington County. And that chapter was really, I think, the catalyst for what got this organization going, because it formed around looking at responsible oil and gas development in those counties over there. And so the folks in that community really came together, and it really helped get the statewide organization up and running. And we're currently, there are other areas of the state that we are looking at and assessing as issues come up in those places. And so that's just kind of a very quick overview of, like I say, our history and how we got started. And Julia is going to come up now and share a little more with you on our leadership development, who benefits from the work that we do, and then looking more in depth at some of the issue campaigns that we're working on right now.
Thanks, Becky, and thanks to all of you for inviting us here today and giving us a chance to speak to you about our work. It's really a great opportunity to hear intimidating, and that's okay. One of the, I'm involved, here I am brand new to Idaho. I was asked if I was interested in the board last summer. By the second board meeting, I realized, what they wanted me for, which was to be board chair, because some of the people that had done the groundwork didn't want to carry on and be board chair, and I had 20 years of experience in Montana working with a similarly structured organization. I very much believe in the model that says the members are the organization. We understand that without staff to keep you organized, keep you on track, tell you where the opportunities are, you'd be lost. But the members of the organization, the members speak for the organization, and sometimes that message is imperfectly delivered because we didn't get trained adequately, we weren't listening, or we were busy last night getting ready for something else, and then we have to speak, but it's a great model, and it's empowering. So I believe in it absolutely. I'm a product of it, and I have very high regard for the work that goes into getting Becky and I, for instance, to speak to you today. Who benefits from the work of IORC? I would say the individuals who choose to get involved, and that's a little odd, but the organization, I think the first chapter was down in Weiser, and those guys got involved because something happened in their community that they wanted to react to. The gas development down there spurred them. And I think rural communities, we do emphasize work in rural communities. Often they're underrepresented and the individuals feel underpowered. And yet you find that when you do the hard work of going and finding who those folks are who want to make a difference in their community, and then working with them to bring them along, hone their skills, pump up their bravery to say, yes, you can speak to your county commission as they try to develop the oil and gas ordinance for Washington County. You can do this. That's the reward, that's the hard work of getting going. And if you allow this to happen, if you allow yourself to get drafted onto the board and do the work of the organization, if you allow yourself to be part of the Weiser River Resource Council and speak out on oil and gas, there is nothing like speaking out on an issue to give you ownership of that issue. You know, you better speak the truth because that's going to be you're going to be associated with your words. It's a very powerful thing. And we certainly found local people in whatever community, there is every range of ability and personality, and all of those folks can start somewhere and learn and get better, and everybody can participate. And one thing that locals bring to these issues is knowledge. They're not the professionals, they're not the water quality expert, but they do know how the water that runs through their place nourishes their place. And they have enjoyed, say, clean air for years, and they might be worried about the outcome if a wellhead or a plant is located too close to their home. Those guys are the expert on their homes, their own homes. And so there's so much validity in having a local person speak about the issues that impact their community. It's a very powerful thing. So you can go from feeling underpowered, feeling like you're one small person, or as you work with others in your group, you can start to feel like you actually are part of a group. I don't know if I'd call it movement, but a group. And all of a sudden, that's one smaller person becomes a powerful thing. I was talking just yesterday to a man who, 50 years ago, as a 20-year-old student, marched from Selma to Montgomery for voting rights and civil rights. And he was talking about that experience. He was scared. He was very scared. I don't know if he knew all about what he was doing that day or those days when he was there on that march, but it stayed with him. It was a part of who he was and who he is today. And then, earlier this summer, he and his son went back and marched that final day together, and he was the one who talked about the foot soldiers in this effort for civil rights. And I see what we do in terms of organizing in rural communities. We're not, I'm not sure I'm comparing us to the civil rights movement, but the effort of individuals coming together to work on an issue, the impact can be very large and very inspiring. He spoke about how 50 years ago, they, at the end of the march, I think it was the end of the march, sang "We Shall Overcome" with Martin Luther King. He's never forgotten that. And when they sang "We Shall Overcome" again this spring, he was taken back to those days 50 years ago, and it was important to him. Let's see, I have notes, but one of the things we do, so we go out, we have one-on-ones so-called with people. We try and find, usually you start with existing leaders, and then you try and get leads. Who else is interested in this? You go out and have a one-on-one with them. This is hard work, but you get authenticity and passion when you use and develop local talent. It's really a neat thing. Then we also have very deliberate, we have 40 years worth of learning how to train people to be better citizen activists. We have a great training called POCO, P-O-C-O. Oh, I have slides. This is actually a group of people attending a POCO training, Principles of Community Organizing, here in Boise last summer. Leaders came from all the work states, that's North and South Dakota, the states that Becky spoke of that are part of the umbrella group. It's both members and new staff who haven't done this training before. So you get together and learn how to choose an issue and how to develop a meaningful campaign plan. The bishop spoke about maybe you don't aim at solving world peace as your sort of out-of-the-box first thing, that maybe you start with making a safe park. That's part of trying to be strategic when you develop a campaign plan. Something that has a chance, you know, you can find a victory there. That's really important. Is this acting on its own? Maybe if you wave at it, it goes. So POCO training is really important. I did it 20 years ago. You learn how to choose a campaign, you learn how to run a meeting, you try and learn how to communicate, that's speaking to media, writing a letter to the editor, those kinds of very mundane and important skills that you need if you're going to go out and try and craft a good oil and gas ordinance for Washington County and or move on to other issues. We sometimes wonder in the work groups in here in Idaho, which comes first, the individual leader or the issue? And there's a little bit of tension there. We try to only take up issues that somebody from the organization, a member, needs to be there and want to be a sponsor, I guess you would say, of an issue. We're not going to have the staff carry the issue for the organization. Staff's job is to identify those leaders and bring them together and then put in place a campaign plan that's achievable. And actually in the business we call it specific, achievable and measurable, SAM. You know, maybe you've heard of that. It's, I think, an organizing standard. That it has to be small enough that, or it could be big, but doable. You need to be able to get there. You need to be happy about something and have achieved a victory, or otherwise, you know, banging your head against the same old brick wall is not that much fun and you won't be able to do it forever. But if you can find a step, an intermediate step, or a step that will get you partway there, you can work on the rest of it. There's nothing like celebrating. It's a great thing. So, the issues, Father Ben's listed them out. I might have a slightly different issue list. This slide that we're looking at here, I see it there. is in Weiser. The Weiser River there's a dam proposed for the Weiser River, be 285 feet high, at least as now proposed. It would back up a reservoir. About 15 miles of the river would be inundated, and there's a number of people there who are concerned, including Friends of the Weiser River. So by our membership included a fisheries biologist who cares about the river and the vitality of that river, the Friends of the Weiser River Trail, excuse me, I forgot the key word, they care about their trail. It's an old rails to trail, it's a railroad right away. They care about that. We worked together and we brought stakeholders, the Water Resources Board members, some legislators together, and just showed them the place and said, this is what we care about, this is why we care. It was really nice. It was about a month ago. That's something you can do, and it made us all feel quite good. This was the end of the tour. The river's right behind everybody's back there, and we were listening to a little bit of a discussion more about what was going to happen. So water is important. Our people in Port Neuf Resource Council, here they are, City of Pocatello. They're trying to get water protection into, some language on water protection into the comprehensive plan for the City of Pocatello. They didn't get it this winter, so they said, all right, we'll back up, we'll do an educational forum. We'll see if we can make some progress that way. There's a time opportunity they might be able to come back and try and get that. Water is important, and it fits very well within our overarching thing. We care about local communities, family scale agriculture, protecting air, land, water, and the people of those communities. So water, it manifests differently in Pocatello than it does in Weiser, and for us here in Boise, but we're not a chapter, so we're general members. It manifests differently, but it's part of that same umbrella of issues. Our two main things, I guess we would say, are oil and gas development. Those guys, Weiser River Resource Council members got a good ordinance, medium good ordinance in Washington County. They'll continue to work on that as they can. And then this winter, in the legislature, there were some actions, and Idaho is basically trying to bring its regulations for oil and gas development into the 21st century. There hasn't been much gas development here or oil development, so they need to have rules. And one of the things that the industry did is came in with a piece of legislation that exempted the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission from having to, the rules of the contested case hearing. But, the department, to their credit, said, well, if we aren't subject to that, we ought to be subject to something, so that public participation before the commission, so that the public knows how they can participate. So we're going to be following that rulemaking, which will go on this summer in several meetings that are being organized. And that's how we will try and get local people there, people who care, to come and participate. Another statewide issue we're working on, and it has everything to do with homegrown prosperity, the success of the rural community, and family scale agriculture, or really small scale agriculture perhaps, is cottage food. We want to enable the preparation of food in a home kitchen, uninspected home kitchen, for direct sale to consumers, to customers. And it isn't really addressed in Idaho law now, so some view that as, no rules, fine, we're enabled. But what we found is there are 7 health districts in the state, and there's inconsistency across the 7 health districts. Nobody quite knows what to do. We feel if there was a publicly known policy, that it was accessible online so everybody could find it. If the health districts were all consistent, and there was some kind of registration process so they, you could know you were legal in doing this product, whatever it was, if it's baking cookies or fancy cakes and or temperature-controlled stuff like salsa, that you know you could start and get into business. And it was, and so we feel that this could create lots of opportunity across rural Idaho. It would be great for this state. It would be great and perhaps enough supplemental income for a family to be meaningful, and perhaps that even leads to a business that goes on to be big business. But meanwhile, it gives an opportunity for someone at home to do something meaningful to them. So I think that's enough time here. That's what we do. I'd like to, again, thank you. Sort of a cursory look at what we're doing and how we're trying to do it. And if there's time for questions, we'll certainly try and answer them. Thank you.
I think the important thing about that presentation is not only the important work that they're doing, but the model it is for all of us in community organizing around particular issues. When she was talking about homegrown businesses, and the sisters in Cottonwood have an issue with canning vegetables. You know, they've been jamming the raspberries forever, but there was an issue up there recently with them canning vegetables and some of the local controls over that. And they were running into resistance in terms of being able to continue to can vegetables in Cottonwood at the monastery. So this is a very relevant issue for the Catholics on the prairie. So Michael has something to say, and after Michael has something to say, Christy King has something to say.
You definitely need to work on getting your message out in the media. In the States, 2 weeks ago, they had a huge article on the Weezer right-of-way, the railway bike path, and I didn't see anything about it with the dam they want to build. So whatever your media model is, you're going to have to really look hard at the great causes. And I know it's a new organization, but you got to spread the news.
We'll be gathering for Eucharist at 5. So Christy has something that maybe people want to do a little bit tomorrow morning.
Yes. Good afternoon. I was asked to announce that at 8 o'clock in the morning, Susan Sullivan will be doing a really short presentation on resources about Catholic social teaching in Spanish. So the presentation will be in English, but she'll be talking about the resources that are available in Spanish through the website. Is that correct? So mañana a las 8 de la mañana, Susan Sullivan va a presentar sobre los recursos que están disponibles en Internet, en español, acerca del tema de la doctrina social de la Iglesia.
Take the mic.
So, yes, we'll see you in the worship space.
Answer
that. She's saying, answer that. I think you're correct. There was a lot of confusion, well, not confusion. Weezer River, that was a great opportunity to follow it up, and or with letters to the editor, the cottage food bill, and we had a bill that failed this legislature. We need to get the word out about how and what, and then what we're advocating. It's a constant challenge, and in Montana we had like 2,500 people and 40 years of experience, and here we're brand new, and it's really challenging. But thank you, I agree.
No problem.